Right, welcome everybody to another roundtable with Conservation Without Borders. I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to steer the ship today because we have a fantastic, stellar group of people who will be speaking later on. First though, just for those of you who don't know me, just a quick background of what my involvement is this. I'm founder of a company called Celtic Renewables. We're based in Grangemouth, which is the petrochemical centre of Scotland, which is kind of close to everybody's hearts in terms of where we're looking and going forward. Our company takes the wastes and residues of other industries. Notably, we're working with the Scottish whisky industry, where 90% of what goes in the front door does not end up as whisky at the end of the process. Only 10% becomes whisky. So we can take all that other residue that's already been generated by a primary and very important industry and convert that into advanced sustainable chemicals that we use every day of our lives. And I think what's important about Sacha's endeavor that's coming up very shortly now is that it's taken the focus away from why and more into how. It's not stop and pointing fingers and saying, oh, we all have to change our lives completely and not do things. We change our lives completely, we just do them differently. Innovation brought us this carbon crisis. Innovation can and should take us out of it. And we're hoping to play our part in that by saying, yeah, you can still use the chemicals that we need every day in our lives in healthcare and sanitation and painting and everything. You can even drive your car on a totally unmodified engine with one of the chemicals that we make from residues of another industry. So these are the things that we can continue to still do. It's not pointing fingers and saying, stop doing everything. This really must be about being grown up about it and saying how we can do things, but do them differently, do them sustainably. It's not go back to the Stone Age. We're not going back to the caves here. We're just going to live our lives in a different way by focusing on the innovation and the changes and the ideas that can take us out of an industrial revolution and into a green revolution. And that's why we at Celtic Renewables are particularly proud to be associated with Sacha in what she's doing, because fundamentally she's shining a light on the positivity around this sector. There's no demonization here. It's about going around and showcasing what can be done. And we'll speak to Sacha very shortly, live from where she's preparing on her mad adventure. But we'll also be joined by a number of other key influencers, people who are making a difference and can make a difference to other people as we head into a new world, a changed world, a different world, where we meet the targets that we're setting ourselves, not set them, meet them. So we're joined today by Sir Tim Smit, who is behind the incredible Eden project, Sarah Farrell from Dumfries and Galloway Council, Jackie Murray from Innovate UK, John Brown from Don't Cry Wolf Media Company, and from Emma Stratton for the Eco Hotel Company, Scarlet Hotel. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of their different stories and how they in their own way can change our everyday lives and influence people to do things a little bit differently. Here's the bit that those who know me will laugh now, because I'm going to tell you that you should share your LinkedIn profiles and follow us on social media with the hashtag Round Britain Climate Change. Me and social media are not the closest of allies, I have to confess. So yeah, there's a laugh and a chuckle going around for people who do know that I'm social media illiterate, but most of you aren't. So please do share, do join with us, spread the word around. And that's kind of one of the things we're trying to capture today, is how we can influence and spread the positivity about doing the right thing. So the person who's the one we're all sort of standing behind in awe in all of this is Sacha Dench, you're an ambassador who's about to travel around Britain on the Round Britain Climate Challenge. Personally, I think she's crazy to be even trying all this, but it is absolutely inspirational what she's doing. And we're fresh with 2 hours, I think, a maximum of 2 hours sleep that she's put into the bonnet at this point in time. I hope your batteries on your Paraglider are better charged than you are. I'm delighted to be joined by Sacha Dench.
Thank you very much. And on your social media, just so you know, it's a Round Britain Climate Challenge as opposed to Round Britain Climate Change. But otherwise, yes, excellent. And yeah, thank you all for coming this evening. A lot of you will have heard previous updates, but I'm supposed to give a quick summary of what the expedition is about, and then I'll explain why I'm doing this briefing from a tent. Yeah, and then a few key facts, and then I suppose why we're doing it. And thank you, Martin Tanganay, also for stepping in. That was amazing of you. So yeah, the expedition that we are about to undertake, starting actually, well, we're having a public launch in Glasgow on the 18th. And then we'll be heading up to Loch Lomond for a couple of days of preparation and then setting off from the 21st as soon as we can, as soon as we get good flyable weather. The expedition is basically a circumnavigation of the UK, which is a Guinness World Record. But what it's really about is trying to rally the whole country behind the question, if Britain drove the Industrial Revolution, how can we drive the Green Revolution too? And we're doing that under a few levels. So first of all, the reason for flying is partly putting a bit of skin in the game, showing that actually things that are quite hard, sorry, the team can come and go as you like, it's fine. Right? Yes, sorry. Don't feel awkward. We know that there's a pretty narrow passageways in a tent. Yeah, so we're trying to fly around the country, decarbonize my expedition model, so put a bit of skin in the game. I am known as the human swan for flying a migration with the Buick swans from the Russian Arctic. Climate change was the exacerbating factor in pretty much every country. I couldn't not talk about it, but I couldn't also not look at the fact that I fly a petrol-powered paramotor with a petrol-fueled ground crew. And then the second big thing for me was talking about climate change, knowing about it intellectually, and the difference there between talking about it as a fact, as a scientific fact, and then losing our house in the Australian bushfires last year. It was a moment that really made me have to think about it all differently. And so, yeah, I spent a bit of time looking at the whole issue and realized that what I thought we could best bring to the whole climate change conversation, particularly in this year of COP26, was to use the model of the last expedition, which was getting lots of people inspired to help us with swan conservation. But we did it by inviting them to be a part of it, sharing our stories in the best way that we could, putting a bit of skin in the game again. I flew with the migration with the birds, but I had a realization along the route that people were excited by the idea of, or interested, first got their attention by the idea of crazy lady trying to be a bird. People's imaginations opened when you started talking about the world from a bird's point of view. You showed them aerial images. You talked about the kinds of things that scientific investigation can bring out. But the thing that really made people say, well, we could do our bit, or why haven't you ever asked us to help, which was really unexpected, for example, from the hunters, was when I told stories of other people who were doing their piece for helping the swans, so they could kind of envisage themselves, I suppose, in those stories. So I realized that whilst I can fly this circumnavigation of the UK, well, I'm going to attempt it in an electric powered paramotor. The real power in the story to create change is to stop in and speak to people who've got not only experience of climate change direct, but also have solutions. And those solutions coming from all sorts of quarters, from industry, from community, from farming, from all areas. So that's really the core of this expedition, is to rally the public behind the heroes that are making big efforts to tell their stories in a way that's more engaging than the fear mongering that often is quoted around climate change. And yeah, a big audience for us is the public, obviously. I'm an ambassador for the campaign called Count Us In, which is the official public engagement campaign for COP26, as is Tim Smit. We're also running a schools engagement campaign, but a really key thing for us is the business community as well, and hearing from individuals, real people and their stories. And the theme for this evening was because I think in business and industry, there's amazing potential to use influence to inspire a lot of people. And so, yeah, with that, I think I've covered everything apart from expedition update. So why am I in a tent? The whole team has gathered for the first time together in a field in Devon. It's actually a very large tent. You can't see the extent of it, but there's an edit suite behind you. So the normal blackout areas in a tent are behind you where the editing suites are set up. And there's kit storage, there's kitchen out the back, and the vehicles are outside where we can basically be testing our flying kit from the field. It's Derek Gow, who's known as the Beaver Man, who's hosting us for these few days. And there are plenty of the team around, although they're lying low because this is an official call, but there's several all around who'll be coming in and out. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment. I'm just about ready. And with that, I'll pass over back to you, Martin.
Thanks, Sacha. I think I can say without any degree of hesitation, which I just did, that we're all quite in awe of what you're doing. I'm just going to call you back on one, the Count Us In world record that you're trying to set is for the most pledges during the period that you're running it from, which I've been told to point out to people. It's the 18th of June, which is when Sacha's doing her press release of this event, to the 18th of July, and I would encourage everybody to try and sign up from that. If and when she is successful, you'll get a Guinness World Records chart, which I personally going to frame and stick on the wall.
Can I add to that, that I don't need to successfully do the flight to get that second record. So all we need to do, even if we don't make the flight, if we've motivated 140,001 people to sign up to action, then that will have been the important record broken.
Well, then there's the onus on everybody else, and Sacha's off the hook on this one. So you heard the lady, you know what you need to do. I'm delighted to move on now to Sir Tim Smit, somebody who has shown that you can do things. He saw possibilities where nobody else did. He's been a long supporter of Sacha and what they're doing, and I'm delighted that Sir Tim can join us to talk about his work. He's the founder of the amazing Eden Project at Cornwall, and hopefully many other places to come as we follow his tremendous example.
Well, hello, everybody. It's so lovely to be amongst friends. We're going to talk for 5 minutes or so about influence and what we can do. One of the things I find difficult is, I remember Oscar Wilde, there's a quote by Oscar Wilde which says, "No one remembers the well-mannered person at a party." And I've taken that rather to heart when I've wasted parts of my life being at conferences and things, hearing people being unbelievably mediocre, incredibly dull, and standing up and taking an hour of my life at a time as they bore me. And I think it's really important to do things like Sacha is doing, because actually it gives people things to talk about, makes people feel as if it's life affirming and as if we can really do something. Obviously, I did the Eden Project with a whole bunch of other people. And I've come late in life to realizing that perhaps one of the problems of the environmental discussion is that either we're trying to please too many people and not calling people fibbers, or we're actually talking about the wrong things, like waggy-fingered Old Testament prophets, so that we are actually trying to say, you guys are bad or you guys are good. When in fact, I've discovered recently that if I say to people, do you think there should be clean water everywhere and it belongs to everybody? People say yes. Do you think that there should be clean air? Do you think there should be clean, fertile soil? What you suddenly start to discover is that the majority of people, I mean, the vast majority of people you talk to, recognize that those things which we on this call all recognize as being, if you like, what you might call loosely the commons. It then creates a situation where I think we have a duty to be unreasonable. People like you, Martin, and I, and a lot of people on this call need to actually say, hang on, you can be interested in being commercial, you can even be a capitalist and still find it completely out of order, without moral compass, to poison the waterways, to damage the soil, to pollute the air. And I think we've let people get away with murder by making people side with what they think is their social class or their establishment. And actually, we need to get everybody to say, stand up. There are certain things which belong to the commons and they belong to the future. And if they're being polluted, it is treasonous to the future. And I think we need to be very unreasonable about that. I also think that we ought to kick anybody in the shins who starts talking about carbon sequestration in the way that they currently are, about putting it away underground in mines. I've noticed that it started with Obama, which I think is terrible, because I rather admired Obama until I saw he was actually a lickspittle of the oil community and believed this and spoke about it. You know what this is like? This is exactly like being a chain smoker and you come up to me and say, I've got a pill which will stop you getting cancer. That's exactly what it is like, because the putting away carbon in that fashion, there is no proven example except in one place, in Norway, under a basalt ridge. The way of dealing with carbon is to stop the fossil fuel industry telling you that there's no alternative. At Eden, we've started drilling 2 weeks ago. We're going down 4.7 kilometers. And at 4.7 kilometers, we're fully expecting to have between 180 and 240 degrees C, which will then pump up, and it will both give the whole of Eden as much hot water as you can shake a stick at, but it will also give us the wherewithal to grow a huge range of crops and aquacultured products. And of course, it will charge our turbines, and we'll be producing 3.4 megawatts, which is enough for everything we need. Plus 17,000 houses. We're also putting in a huge amount of solar over all our car parks. My aspiration is, if all 1.2 million visitors to Eden were coming from Venus, they would still be carbon negative. And I feel really fierce about this, because I know that with the will of all of us, if we had the spirit of a Brunel, a spirit of a Sacha, we could actually transform our nation inside probably 7 years to be completely energy independent, because geothermal that we're putting in is the base load. It's the holy grail. It means that when the sun don't shine and the wind don't blow, you've got something in that base load that is renewable, that can just bolster the system to make sure that we've got enough energy to go around. And I think if we all put our shoulders to the wheel, we could get this. Oh yes, protesters will say, oh, it doesn't work everywhere. You know why they say it won't work everywhere? Because scientists said it wouldn't work everywhere for the cost. That's the trouble when accountants infect a discussion, because the plunging price of fossil fuels that you will get the nearer you get to 2030 plus means that the drilling rigs will cost a third less, a half less, 75% less. So you'll be able to go deeper. Within 10 years, you'll be able to get that sort of heat out of London, out of Birmingham, out of Edinburgh, out of Glasgow. And we can be completely energy independent. I just wanted to have a little bit of a rant, because there's a danger that you see all of us as a bunch of kind of alternative, you know, nut cutlet eating hippies who want to do something a bit cool, and we're all riding on Sacha's back to do something that's quite exciting to make us feel a bit braver. And the danger is that we don't say, excuse my Greek, fuck it, it's time for a revolution now. And this isn't a revolution about not knowing where you're going. We can actually build a strategy for change, for agriculture, for energy, for ocean cleaning, that all of it will create new wealth. This is the bonkers thing, as Martin said earlier. We can create new wealth. We are at the dawning of a new green enlightenment, and we must not let those who are addicted to fossil fuels, addicted to non-control of people's behaviors, talk us out of the fact that we're rather clever little creatures that are quite capable of bringing ourselves back within planetary boundaries. And we should just become unreasonable. I think everybody on this call should be studiously unreasonable with a great deal of charm, and make everybody else feel completely inferior for not believing what we do. Other than that,
to be unreasonable.
yeah, I think we should all be unreasonable in our reasonableness. So there you are. That's all I've got to say.
And it was quite a
Very
lot.
much, Tim.
Thank you, Sir Tim. You should be more blunt, really, I think. You hide a bit. But, you know, the fundamental message, I think we all accept that. I believe in the mantra as well, that being environmentally sustainable only really works globally if you're economically sustainable at the same time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with making money out of doing the right thing and replacing things. It's not live your life back in the Stone Age. Live the life where we can live it. Just do it with different things made in different ways and create a new sustainable future. I also like to think that it's not the big picture that matters completely, because all of this is about individuals as well as attacking the larger ideas. My granny had the great saying, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. And I think there's a little bit of collective responsibility. And again, this goes back to what Sacha is doing, I think, is shining a light on all of the individuals, right across from school children to the large companies and the smaller companies like us, to see how are you all going to play your part. And collectively, I don't hope, I believe we can all do something. So thank you once again for your thoughts, which as ever are interesting and engaging. Can I move on to Sarah Farrell from Dumfries and Galloway Council, who also gets the big picture thing what they're doing, but they've actually set targets, and they're pretty ambitious targets in terms of time and what they're trying to achieve. But fortunately, Sarah is a woman with a plan, and I, for one, am looking forward to hearing how she thinks she can get there. So Sarah Farrell.
Thank you very much, Martin. That's really super, and thank you for inviting me along. I'm really pleased to be here. It's a fantastic group, and these are fantastic events. I've attended many. So yeah, I'm the Climate Emergency Project Officer for Dumfries and Galloway Council. The council declared a climate emergency in June 2019 with the aspiration of being a net zero carbon region by 2025. So a hugely ambitious target for us. The declaration was presented with a 12-point plan of actions, and many of them have been achieved so far. We appointed initially one of our elected members, Councillor Dougie Campbell, as the Environment Champion, and Councillor Campbell leads on the climate emergency across the region. Very quickly, we're appointed a cross-party working group. So there are 4 elected members representing political groups across the region who monitor the progress of the 12-point plan. So we really have great support and great ambition there within elected members within the council, and that filters down through to officers. We have an officers working group which consists of just over 30 members. The members within that group are decision makers and influencers across the council services. And then in March 2020, they appointed myself as the Climate Emergency Project Officer. So immediately when I took on the task, I thought, well, we need to know where we stand, where we are right now, to be honest, and what we're telling people, because at the moment, we don't know. So first thing I did was commissioned a regional baseline emissions inventory and someone to look at a strategic plan and route map to 2025. We also commissioned carbon literacy training, and we were very fortunate through that to be awarded the Carbon Literate Organisation, being the first Scottish local authority, non-metropolitan local authority, sorry, to be awarded the Carbon Literate Organisation badge, which we're very pleased with. We developed and adopted a new strategic council priority to urgently respond to climate change and a transition to a carbon neutral region. And for the council, that means that every activity that is carried out within the council, every report, every policy and strategy has to comply with the council priorities. So that was fantastic support as well for us, and supported the officers across the council to push this out. Bearing in mind that the officers don't just work within the council organisation, we support the whole region with services, communities and businesses across the region. I have also set up recently a regional climate emergency stakeholders network, which takes in all the industries we've already mentioned on the call so far. So agriculture is the biggest industry within Dumfries and Galloway. We're very rural, and we have mostly agriculture as employers. We have forestry, landowners. There are industry, obviously community schools, colleges, other public sector, and this group is in its early stages at the moment, but will involve all of these stakeholders, because we all need to pull together to bring this across the region. I have commissioned a citizens panel. The tender is still out for that at the moment. It's due to close. The citizens panel will be a 12-month programme and will work hand in hand with the regional stakeholders network. That group in itself is going to be very helpful to provide us with as much information about how the region is feeling, how people across the region are moving on. But what I'm seeing at the moment is very much what's been mentioned already, that people are keen, they're very interested. Over the past couple of years, I've been involved in this sort of thing, in sustainability, climate change for 18 years, and over the past year and a half at least, we've seen such a change in attitude and people willing to move forward. There's a number of people every day asking me if they can join the carbon literacy training, and that for me is fantastic. But when I'm speaking to any groups, whether it be small groups, large groups, industry, individuals, my message to them is always, how can you get involved to reduce the region's carbon emissions? Because we are all in this together. And, the more responsible people that we have pulling together builds the confidence for other people to make the change and has a significant impact on our carbon emissions. We share projects as well. We have many projects across the region which are popping up daily, which is fantastic. We will support every one of them, and we share that information with others to encourage them to take it forward as well. So that's where we are so far. Yes, time is running out very rapidly. We will be looking to review the strategic plan. It will be an ongoing thing because, as we know, everything's changing, methodologies changing all the time. You know, we're getting more and more information that we maybe didn't have when we brought the baseline forward. And just to give you an example of you know, one of the statistics that always amazes me, although it shouldn't really, but the council's own emissions are 0.7% of the regional emissions. So we can totally influence 0.7%. Other than that, it's engaging with people, encouraging people, supporting people, and hand-holding to get to where we need to be. That's, as I say, is where we are at the moment, and I'm open for any questions when the time's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll just ask you one quick question. We
Yep.
had a theme that Sacha introduced at the start about influencers. Do you feel that what you're doing in Dumfries and Galloway is different to the other councils? Do you feel that you can influence other people in any way in what you're doing, or do you think it's, you know, it's kind of harmonious right across the board?
I think other councils are declaring climate emergencies. They're not all doing what we're doing. There's many local authorities that I want to speak to me and find out what we did. I've shared documentation with them, shared the practice that I have carried out. But within local authority across Scotland, particularly ourselves and Highland Council have the same 2025 target. But I'm in touch with all 32 local authorities, and most of them are very keen to do something. And as I say, we are the first to move forward on it. So I won't have got it right first time, I'm aware of that. So I'm more than happy to share my experiences with the others so that they can take the lessons learned from my experience and build on that to improve every time. So we tend to try and link everybody up, you know, that has been through the process and how we can improve it.
Yeah, I think I know what it's like to be the first doing things. There must be an air of madness about you as well. And so there's a great old saying that the pioneers take the arrows and the settlers take the land. But yeah, got a few arrows, I'll have to confess. But I hope yours are less painful and that you do manage to make a difference, because I think as the influencers, the people who take those first steps, that really do matter most. Yeah. And on that note, I'd like to move on to John Brown, somebody who isn't shy of talking and telling people what to do, and he's a sponsor as well of the Round Britain Challenge, which is important because it does need backing. So anyone else out there who wants to get involved, please don't hesitate to come up and support the whole challenge and to become a sponsor for it or to engage in any way you can. A lot of this is about, and COP itself is about communications, about getting people to sit down and chat about it, and that's kind of what John does. And I suppose the question is, in your role as the founder of Don't Cry Wolf, how do you think you can influence the influencers is the question I would ask you, and how important branding is for everybody involved in this. So over to you, John.
Oh, thanks very much, Martin. I really appreciate the invite to come and have a chat with you guys today. So yeah, my name is John Brown. I head up Don't Cry Wolf for a B Corp certified brand activism agency. I do have some slides, but to be honest with you, they'll probably bore the arse off you. So I won't share the slides. I'll just chat through them instead, unless you got them. So I think where we got is this enormous opportunity, and I think something that we keep discussing with the brands that we're working with is how do we make sure that we go from creating a climate of fear to a climate of confidence? How do we go from moving a discussion from confusion into clarity and move the work that we're doing as brands away from recklessness and towards commitment? And I think that's the environment which I think brands can actually help influence and create, which is one of confidence, clarity, and commitment. And that will end up resulting in some positive action. I think what we need to be careful of as brands, and something which I keep getting on my soapbox about on a fairly regular basis, is that there is a huge difference between declaring a climate emergency or announcing a net zero target and actually putting in place actions to do something about those things. And I think this is where we need to make sure, if there's anyone watching or is part and parcel of this who are looking for how they can differentiate their brand in this discussion, it's about how do you move away from intent into action. So you know, to put things sort of quite bluntly in a stat, the amount of net zero commitments has doubled over the year, and yet only 7% of organizations right now are prepared to actually report on them on a year-by-year basis. And that for me is a slight bit of worrying. It's all well and good to say, hey, do you know what, in 50 years time we're going to be net zero, and put it out as a PR campaign and not really worry too much about it. It takes a lot more guts and guile to actually put some action in place and show people quite transparently how you're getting on with it. And I think what I wanted to kind of leave you guys, or kind of to focus or steer the discussion around, was sort of 4 roles that brands I think can operate in today. I think the first one is this idea of an energizer. I think this is a deeply important role that a brand can play, and that is getting people excited, engaged, and actually, you know, taking an awful amount of inspiration from some of the magnificent work that is taking place in and around the world to address an existential issue in our world. And I think this act of being an energizer as a brand and adopting that place, you don't always have to have the answers, but you can be a fucking great cheerleader as an organization and do a really good job of that. And we need more of those within this branding world. The second thing is acting as a sage. And I think this is where this is an important personality for a brand to adopt. You don't always have to have all the knowledge, but being a disseminator of knowledge and information and sharing the right information, I think is absolutely critical, and a really important opportunity for brands to adopt that personality and then influence others by sharing that information, that knowledge base, being more open with the knowledge. I think the other thing is around making sure that, or the other sort of persona is this idea of a coach. And this leads into this sort of territory of, don't just do a campaign for campaign's sake. Right now, I'm getting slightly concerned about the amount of eco-consumerism campaigns that we're seeing sort of take place every day. And sorry guys, but a bamboo coffee cup is not going to save the world. Like, we don't need to buy more bamboo coffee cups. We probably need something that is a little less sexy, but a little more important. And for a brand right now, I would be looking at how, if I was looking to get involved in this debate, in this discussion, how can I bring to life some of the unsexier stuff that's taking place in the wider world, but something that is deeply important and actually needs a bit of celebrating, needs being brought to life? How do I champion that as a brand? How do I use my brand power and resources to bring that to life, rather than perhaps slap my logo on another coffee cup and distribute it out to my audience? I think that would be one thing that I'd be looking to do. The final thing, and this is taking a line straight out of Sir Tim Smit's book here, but the other thing is to be the critic. And I think this is a really powerful position for a brand to adopt. I want to see more brands call bullshit, and they need to perhaps call bullshit on each other as well, because I think that allows the truth and what is happening and what desperately needs attention to rise to the top, and for audiences and consumers to pay more attention to the right things rather than necessarily absorb some of the misinformation that people enjoy spreading and is a fairly sort of popular tactic right now. So let's see whether you could adopt a persona of being a bit of a critic, being a bit of an antagonist in this, and pointing out where, well, actually, I'm not quite believing your latest sort of net zero claim or wider kind of claim that you're making as a brand. And what our final thing that I try and do is sort of finish off with a few things that people can do right now, or brands can do right now. I'd say the first one is to think personal. If you're an organization or brand or a marketing person or a comms person right now, get that personal story out there. There's a great example. There's some fantastic work taking place over in Yale that's looking at how comms around the climate crisis is changing and evolving. One of the things that they've spotted is that it was far easier to change the opinion of a Texas oil man by highlighting that, how it was specifically affecting his personal environment, pub. I don't think they have pubs out in Texas, but you know, the equivalent, you know, how it was personally affecting his environment, and far easier to change their opinion from a personal perspective than telling the bigger picture story. So if you're an organization or a brand, I'll be looking at how you can get more personal with some of the comms that you're producing. Second thing you could do is work with trusted sources. Don't pretend, if you don't have the knowledge as a brand and you don't have the authority or the credibility to get involved in this debate, then partner with those that do. I think that's absolutely critical. There are hundreds of people out there with a huge amount of knowledge and aspiration and ideas and innovation who are begging for a platform, who are desperate for a platform to be able to communicate their story. If you can elevate them through the power of your brand, you'll be cool by association, and you'll have far more legitimacy getting involved in this debate than pretending that you know something about what we're talking about. I think the other thing is around transparency. Transparency kills fear. So right now, if you're feeling fearful as a brand about getting involved in this discussion, about celebrating some of your success stories, be transparent about everything, about warts and all, what you're going to get right as well as what you're going to get wrong. If you share this transparently, you can be fearless in your communications. You can be fearless in the way that you influence, because everything's out there for the public to see. And that's what we want from organizations and from brands, is a platform of transparency that you can work from. The final thing in all of this that I'd leave you with is just don't assume knowledge. There's a great stat that Pope Francis accounted for far more of an increase in Americans that believing in climate change was real than anything else that's happened over the past sort of 6 to 12 months. And that's because cultural relevance and talking in a language that people genuinely understand and bringing a conversation to a more human level is actually far more powerful than always trying to talk from a very, very high position. So see how you can get personal, more kind of intricate and delicate, and don't assume that everyone understands the jargon and the buzzwords that we all share each and every day working within this industry. That was very much a whistle-stop rant as to what brands can do, but I hope there's some sort of takeaways that you guys can take from that.
Eloquent as ever. Thank you very much, John. Can I just fire one quick one at you? I mean, I agree with you on so much of what you say and about branding, and it does need endorsement. You need a third party, otherwise it's greenwashing. And I think the whole area needs to stay away from, oh yeah, I'm super clean because I said I'm super clean. What do you think about COP itself? As a brand, I mean, it has survived on setting targets and fear mongering and why and justification of its mere existence. And I think from everything that everybody said today, this is now really the mood in the street, I think, is moving on to showing how you're going to do all of this. Show me exactly how you're going to achieve all these targets while we're going to talk about it. Do you think the COP brand itself has captured what I pick up and from talking to people is a real feeling in the street about it?
Well, I think this is the last chance. So I think this, I can't stress enough how important this COP is. From, I mean, even just from a superficial brand perspective. If there is no genuine action or movement towards action versus intent, then I think it will really struggle. The same way as, Davos is less anything meaningful and more a place where rich people go to have their photo taken with Greta Thunberg. I think this is where COP could potentially head towards, which is a sort of very superficial discussion that, that we kind of loosely celebrate each year. And now that COP has an enormous responsibility to move away from now slightly intangible, ethereal intent and towards meaningful action, and actually communicating on a meaningful basis. I think if you ask go at 2 a.m. to a McDonald's and ask someone who's smashing back a Big Mac what they think about COP, and they're not going to give a shit. And I think that's a problem. It's not communicating in that in a way that's relatable, tangible, human, emotional, and it needs to. We need to emerge from this having done more than just set some fairly ethereal targets.
Well, hopefully Sacha will be able to tell the UN when she gets back after her mission some of the wonderful things that I know are going on around the country and the supporters that she does have. And thanks to you for being one of the sponsors of the whole thing. I have 2 more speakers that I have to get in before we finish off. Can I move next on to Jackie Murray at Innovate UK? She's the queen of all things EV, and innovation, as I said at the very start, is critical to how we're going to get our way out of this. It's important that we bring things to the market, that they become real and that they become as normal to us as last year, the year before. And we just walk in, it's just being done differently. So how are we going to do it in the whole EV and battery world, Jackie?
I think it's really nice to take over from Andy Kerr's comment about how, right? So let's give you a bit of background about me. Posh Tunbridge Wells accent belies a rough comp in the southeast. Went to Manchester, then went on to steelworks. I spent 10 years in hard hat and boots on steelworks, really learning how to be an engineer. But after 10 years, I couldn't get the jobs because I was female, and I actually ended up going, right, that's it. I'm going to go to the Environment Agency and see what I can do, because that's my other passion. If I'm not making stuff, I want to make the world a better place, right? I actually think that's quite a big part of being an engineer. And I did 14 years there, and I never wanted to get into climate change. Sorry for everybody on the call, right? And the reason I didn't was, I think it's summed up actually by a brilliant quote by a guy called Michael Porter, who's a strategist, right? And I hate strategy because I'm an engineer, I want to deliver. And he said, unfortunately, I'm an engineer. I'm always thinking about how to get the task done. And some of my tasks are pretty big, pretty fuzzy, and pretty funky. And it always felt like the climate change was always such a difficult, complex thing to get into. So obviously I have an issue with sticking to my mantras through my life, because for the last 4.5 years, I've been running this thing called the Faraday Battery Challenge. It's around, it's a huge, great program from government looking at how to really invent the electric vehicle batteries of the future, using UK science, UK engineering, UK industry to create something different. And what I've learned is my passion for sustainability that I've learned on the steelworks, learned in the Environment Agency, really has been something that personally I've had to influence on. When you're working on innovation, and you'll know this, Martin, your engineers really just want to deliver, right? They really want to build it. And actually having extra things to think about, such as sustainability, such as climate change, actually can make it more of a headache. Thinking about pollution and other things, And for me, I love that. I love that really big, fuzzy, funky problem, which is the system-based approach. And I think in the 21st century, that's our problem. Our problem is the system. It's so complex. And actually, I think I heard a brilliant phrase, which was the currency of success in the 21st century is trust. So when I look back on the last 4.5 years, what I'm really pleased to say is we've really looked at all the sustainable development aspects of batteries, rather than just creating the faster charging, the longer range batteries. Now, there's a really good reason for that anyway, right? So I think John was talking about misinformation, right? And it drives me slightly nuts as a data-orientated person to see some of the myths that are out there. So right here, right now in the UK, but also across most of Europe, from mining lithium all the way through to the recycling of electric vehicles, your impact, your CO2 equivalence, is about 1/3 of the impact of an internal combustion engine vehicle. And that's based on average mileage that you're going to be doing. And there's some really interesting bits that people miss in that. So right here, right now, there's 1/3, but the system isn't finished, right? Engineers aren't finished, scientists aren't finished with it, right? So by 2050, actually, transport could get down to, a vehicle could get down to 1/20th, 1/10th of the impact on the environment that it has now. And those are big numbers. And when you look at the net zero and you break it all out into what needs to change, the industry has been making big moves and has a long way to go. But transport stayed really stubbornly the same. And it's because we put more and more safety and more weight and more requirements on vehicles. But right here, right now, there's this absolutely transformative event that, because of the regulations to do with CO2 per kilometre, actually car companies know they have to change. And the whole program that I work on comes from this, I want to say, literally just keep the swearing going, holy crap moment in 2016, where the Automotive Council and all the car companies in the UK and the government, somebody very clever worked out that by 2030, they were going to have a CO2 grams per kilometre driven of about 67 grams. And that meant this really nice, commercially acceptable, reasonable, I think, Tim, is probably the correct term, was actually rubbish, that you're going to have to go to full electric. And that's what you've seen, this massive transformation. What I have to say, EVs aren't a zero emission, because actually when you make something, you're always putting something into it, right? And what we have to do is think much more holistically and in a much broader sense about all those developments. So I'm really fortunate to have been out in Bolivia looking at lithium production and potential lithium production. And actually what really struck me as somebody who's worked in environment for a long time was the impact of poverty on the Bolivian environment was absolutely catastrophic. And we know, right? We know how to to work in a way that means the impact can be minimized. But we also need to make sure we know how to fair trade the whole raw materials. We know that we can make the world a better place by an economic sense, as well as, you know, from a technical sense. And I think that's the piece that we really have to sort of think about when we think about footprints. And I don't think, I think the thing that surprised me as well in the whole learning for the last 4.5 years, as it started as the automotive industry, right? So I get to hang out with Jaguar Land Rover and Nissan and God, everyone like McLaren. I have a very sexy job for an engineer. But actually what's happened very quickly is it's mining equipment, it's rail, it's marine, it's the speed of change is phenomenal. 4 years ago, if I wanted to try and talk to somebody about recycling batteries in the UK, I was shouting into a void. You know, earlier today, I came off a call with Jaguar Land Rover ringing me up to say, we want to get involved. And I was saying, well, it's not just you. There's lots of people now in this headspace making those changes, and not just saying they're going to set themselves targets or be part of targets, actually trying to work out how to solve this problem. And that's the bit that I love as an engineer, that moment where you feel the team is coming together. And if the Faraday Battery Challenge has done one thing, it's that Team UK. You know, this problem affects all of us, right? From a girl in Lewisham who the coroner recorded her death as due to NOx in Lewisham because she walked to school next to the South Circular. You know, actually electric vehicles, that takes that away. You know, it doesn't take away perhaps all the particulates, but it's no worse. You know, and we're looking at all those data. It certainly takes away low-level ozone and some of the pollution, right? And I did say I had a pollution background. And for me, actually, when we're making these innovations, making these changes, we have to really think about how does it affect all of society so that all of society benefits, and it's the challenge. So I think that's, yeah, I think that's enough from me for that, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of one of my hobby horses, actually, because we have the potential to impact very heavily on very sustainable biofuels. You can stick straight into a car, and I often ask the simplicity behind the whole EV story. Like, go back to John, like, there's branding and a half, really, isn't it? It's just all about buying an electric car and that's your job done. And as you quite rightly point out, the infrastructure, the supply chain, the electricity itself. We don't have enough green electricity to power our houses, let alone power all our cars. It's a far more complex problem. Henry Ford is famous for mass producing the car. Another man who hailed from County Cork, by the way. What he did was he didn't revolutionize the car. He revolutionized mass production.
Yeah, my favorite quote from him is actually
horse.
One that, yeah, if everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. And it's that principle, but on the 21st century level of complexity. Does that make sense?
My favorite Henry Ford, but actually there's a couple. He was the first biofuel producer. All his cars ran on the famous Model T ran on ethanol.
Yeah.
And his vision was to power a car fueled by the land, which then gave the fuel to power the tractors, to grow the crops, to feed the world, and to power the vehicles that would do it. Was a circular economy 100 years ago. But my favorite one is he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd have asked for a faster horse. So, that's where innovation comes in.
We're going off on it. Sorry, guys.
No, but it is important because, you know, as your role in Innovate UK, innovation is what's going to drive it. People will
Actually, the one bit that I didn't say, and it links back to Tim very, very clearly. So for me, doing things like sponsoring quite radical stuff that we're not 100% sure about, but is really exciting from a local point of view. Things like sponsoring Cornish Lithium, who I know are working with Eden around just finding different ways to extract lithium, for example, so that actually the materials we're using are much, much more sustainable.
No, I think it's a mixture of the individuals and the game changers, and we need to support them all, in my view. But anyway, I do have one final speaker for the evening, which I have thoroughly enjoyed, by the way. And that's Emma Stratton, who is involved in the hospitality sector. You have my deepest sympathies. If there was ever a year and a half to be involved in that sector, well, this certainly wasn't the year and a half you want to try and do it. But yours is from the angle of eco-sustainability. And I'm wondering maybe if this year, in a pervert way, might actually have people looking at how they live their lives and how they stay and how they have their holidays or staycations and that. So I'm really Delighted to have you here to talk about eco hotels and your industry. So,
Thank
Emma.
you. Thank you. It's great to be here and amongst such good company. We started out building our luxury eco hotel, the Scarlet, to challenge what luxury really was, because we think so much of it is awful and wrong and ostentatious and bollocks. But what we wanted was to create something that was simple and beautiful and utterly sustainable. Now, we're still running our 2 hotels on the Cornish coast, but actually our real mission is to challenge the current worldwide business model. And we want radicals and people who share our values to join us, because we need to replace the current business model with something that's more joyful and more generous, with kind of ethics and energy at its heart to inspire other people. And we need to be asking shareholders to share, because they're not right now. And they've got to understand that it's not all about the damn money. It's about having altruism at the heart of companies and leading communities and giving them the resilience for the years ahead, so that they feel inspired to make the changes that will keep us living on this world in a good way. And I think that we can do that, but we really need to radicalize how we approach business and allow the people who run the companies across this world to actually start to take a different approach and ask their shareholders to take a little less but get a lot more. And that's something we feel really excited about. As a company, what we're doing right now, well, we're really recognizing that our teams need to be trained not just in their jobs but for their futures. So we're looking at, how do we teach people the skills that they're going to need to lead future generations? The environment, we're hotels, we've got gardens. Well, we're going to try and make every inch count, so we have some positive environmental growth on the site, and we're going to have fun doing it. In Cornwall and in the hospitality sector at the moment, it's pretty hard, actually. And one of the things we're really trying to raise the voice for those people who don't have a voice is we believe that everybody has the right to housing, and nobody should have to work more than one job to earn enough to live on. So we're really proud to have become a real living wage accredited employer. We're, I believe, the first large hotel to do so, and one of very, very few hospitality organisations across the UK. And that's for life. We really want to become a leading ethical company so that we can share the message that our wonderful customers and so many of our wonderful team have the power to change governments. They have the power to change the world we live in. And we can have an amazing time doing it, because I guess such a great planet as the one we live in, they're hard to find. So although, I spend a lot of my day right now clearing tables and trying to help our team get through what is a very busy summer, we're grateful to be open. But at the same time, our mission is much wider than that. For the last 20 years, we had a solar heated swimming pool 60 years ago, which my father, who's an engineer, built. And now my son's an engineer and scientists, and we're all really looking forward to creating a future. And the young people, so many young people inspire me because they've got it right. They understand the problems. And it's our generations who maybe have a little more power than them that I think have got to do the catching up and lead the rest of our lot that have had it easy and maybe didn't think about the fact that the time to be doing this was 20 years ago, but the second best time to be doing it is now, really making the radical changes that we need, that's transformational, not just the bits around the edges. So I'm really, really admiring of Sacha's determination to do her wonderful trip. And I think that we're going to do everything we can to support the mission, and really best of luck with it all, because I think it's really exciting, and the more that we can do to raise awareness. My 92-year-old mother today is going to be signing up to support you, and I was really pleased with that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to get on as the worst chair in history because we've run right out of time. There's only a couple of minutes left, and I've had the sweariest panel in the history of the universe, and I haven't even sworn myself yet, which is quite good. So before we close off, can I just thank the panel for speaking. Tim, Sarah, Jackie, John, and Emma. So many different contributions, and yet I found there was a common thread running through the whole lot. I mean, it really was about, you know, you said this was the second best time, Jackie. It's not. It's the only time. This is the one. There isn't another one after it. We get it right now, as John said, or there's, you know, you'll suffer forevermore. Before we do close out, can I turn this back to Sacha? And even though we're not supposed to finish at 6, we can indulge it for a couple of minutes. The reason that people are here is because of you. The reason that people are enthusiastic about their stories and wanting them to be told is because you're going to shine a spotlight on them. And you will shine a spotlight on lots and lots and lots of people as you travel around the country and pick up the people who are genuinely trying to make a difference and show that it's how we can do it and now why. And you're going to find them. The reason you're going to attract attention, though, if I could just make this human and personal before we close this out, is that you're doing something that's just quite extraordinary. So just going back to you in the air, like, do you ever get scared? Are you afraid you're going to hurt yourself? Is this a 90 mile an hour head spin all the time for you?
Not anymore. I started paragliding only to get over a horrendous fear of flight. So my first couple of years paragliding were terrifying. Every single flight was short. It was terrifying. But in the end, it was paragliding and then realizing that starting to enjoy a few thermals and then seeing somebody put a motor on their back and realizing they could pretty much fly anywhere. And then I put 2 and 2 together and thought, if I could put a paramotor on my back, have an aircraft in the back of my vehicle, fly anywhere, I could take the most powerful aerial images. And the value of aerial images for the area of conservation I was working at the time, which was wetland conservation, was so incredible, to not only see or say a wetland in a context, but also to encourage people to step back from the kind of the minutiae of what's directly around you and see a bit of the big picture. Just by putting all that into context, it was a really powerful thing. So in the end, to be honest, it was a mission that I had that I actually thought, this will be such a powerful tool. I know this would work. That kind of overcomes all the other little bits. When I'm focused on that mission, I'm not thinking about what's all the air doing exactly all around me. It can be terrifying. To be honest, there are moments, I say terrifying in a small level. A friend described it as in a slide as a bit like hanging from a swing, but as a child might, but a few thousand feet up in the air, where you are kind of attached to just a few strings sitting on a plank. But yeah, for me now, the big picture, seeing that the model of conservation works, the model for inspiring, getting people talking works. It's worked on the last expedition. Nothing else really matters.
I suppose on the flip side of that, I mean, I know you have to monitor so many things and watch where you're going and stay alive. It's kind of important. Do you ever get lost in the moment? Do you kind of just forget where you are and you're suspended midair and just, you know, be at one sort of a thing?
Yeah, many times. There was certainly moments, for example, of flying across the Russian Arctic where I was completely couldn't see any sign of humans, and you don't get that very often. You certainly don't get that from the air when you have such a broad view. So I have a colors, swirling tundra everywhere. There were moments where I was thinking, I'm never going to see this again. This is so stunning. And I had to make a mental picture. So I have a playlist of songs that I had just for the Arctic, so that I could imprint that kind of those particular soundtracks with that space. But yeah, there are lots of blissful moments. Generally, it's when the air is calm. When the air is kind of messy, you're thinking about flying and concentrating.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure I speak for absolutely everybody when I wish you the very best of luck. And unless the other Jackie's going to tell me I need to do some housekeeping here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Martin, for giving us your voice all along the way. And thank you so much for just supporting us as well.
You're brilliant. All right, so thank everybody else for joining the call today. I hope you enjoyed it. It will go online, I believe, at some point in time, so you can share it with people who couldn't turn up today. And please do think about supporting the campaign. And we'll have a look in the skies and ask yourself, is it a bird? Is it a plane? Could it be Sacha?
Oh, is it Sacha?